Jeremy Enns, how are you?
I'm good. How about you, Doug?
Good. Love this study. This is the Podcast Academy with Lower Streets, doing a study on a few things, but I think the big takeaway for me was if you're doing video and audio for your podcast, it looks like it helps the audio as well. You get more downloads, more listens, good consumption time. Is that basically what I'm seeing here?
This is one of the there's kind of two ways. There's probably more ways you could take this. This is one of the potential ways of reading the data, is that putting your show, having an audio video show actually helps the audio show as well. I think that, it's not unlikely. I think it is likely that that does actually happen. I don't know if that's the main way of explaining what's going on here, because the other thing that I could see, which after really looking through a lot of the data that is published in the report and also spending a lot of time with all the background data and just thinking about it, is there's a lot of indicators that the people who are embracing video are perhaps more sophisticated in their business and marketing to begin with. And so video could be a outcropping of that. And so they're already more successful in some areas, and then they have the bandwidth and additional resources and team to be able to expand into video versus it going the other way around. So I think you could look at it as video is influencing and causing these downstream effects in terms of more success elsewhere, or it could be just that these businesses and these creators are already seeing success everywhere else and video just naturally emerges from that.
This is great. So this is deeper than the headlines that we've been seeing for the last, few days. I don't even know if this is a week old, really. To unpack that a bit for me. So someone who's doing video in addition to audio, I can just do that. You and I are recording on Riverside FM right now, and I can just slap the video up on my YouTube channel without doing anything. And some do, and they have success. Good on you. But what you're saying is someone who in general, if you're going to take the time to do video, you tend to do it well. And your study also showed, if I can tack onto that, not necessarily a lot more time that because of the sophistication, they're actually able to do it in roughly the same time parameters.
Yeah, and there's a few things that are interesting about that. And so when we look at the report, there's a couple interesting things here. And the first one that really jumped out to me that kind of got me thinking okay, I think there's a greater level of sophistication as at a whole business angle side of things with video creators. And that was really with this data that it was more likely that people who were doing video had an existing business than the people who are doing audio only. Mm-hmm. And that made me think that I consider myself to some extent a podcaster, but really I think of myself either as a marketer or business owner or creator or something who has no affiliation to any platform other than where can I go to market my business that I enjoy doing? And if there's something new comes along, I'm not going to constrain myself to something if there's something else that would be fun, that would work for me. And so I think that that's probably what we're seeing with a lot of these business owners. They probably don't see themselves as podcasters. They see themselves as creating content to market their business, and YouTube comes along, here's another opportunity. I'm already doing this work. I could take a little bit, spend a little bit extra on my contractors or the time that I'm putting into it, and this opens up more opportunity for me. They actually probably care less about the craft, I think, whereas I think more of the indie podcasters, people who see themselves first and foremost as podcasters, I think they're most likely to feel threatened by all this talk about video because they got into this to want to create audio podcasts, which is totally fine. But I think that that's where there is this distinction between who's doing what, why are people getting into video, and for some people there's just a very kind of ambivalence about what platforms they're on. It's just well, I'm going to go where there's an audience and I can share my content there, and other people are like, no, I have a medium that I am attached to and a way of doing things, and there's an ethos about this, and so I don't want to have to change that thing that I've always done.
And if you're an indie podcaster, this is a hobby, this is a personal thing for you, go for it. Don't make it complicated. Create audio to begin with. It is a bit easier in general to put out. There's very complicated ways to do audio and sound design and theater of the mind and all that, but create audio, and then as you get comfortable, do video. For brands that they don't want to look simple when they come out, they want to show that they are sophisticated brands, and they want to include video. Are you finding sophisticated videos have better viewership success, and sophisticated videos, do they have better consumption rates? By sophisticated, I mean you're going beyond the lower thirds and the one-shot, two-shot thing that AI can just cut.
I think I have not seen enough real back end data and gone through really individually at a show by show level. I know from a handful of people that I've worked with and have friends that it is very hard to say. I think that the one thing that's interesting is the bigger your show grows, the lower the average view duration is going to be. And so you just have way more people as it gets pushed out to the algorithm. We see this in the Spotify analytics as well, where the bigger you are, the more samplers you're going to get, who it's just like casting a really broad net. And so the algorithm is trying to pull people in, and it knows there's momentum behind this, so it tests it out on more people. You get further and further from the center of gravity of people who would actually like this. And so I think about like my show that I do with my co-host, Justin Jackson. We get some videos. This is kind of crazy to me. Like some videos are like 20-minute long average view duration over a few hundred plays, which that's kind of crazy to me because you don't really see that very often. And those are some of the outliers, but most of ours are in the 10-minute plus range. But we do see when when episodes do get picked up by the algorithm, that starts to go down, down, down until then. Now we've got some of our probably biggest videos, which for us, we're in a small niche. And so it's like 2,000 views or something like that. They're at like 4 minutes average view duration. And so it's like there are probably still that base group of people who listen through or watch through the most of the episode, but now you've got a ton of people who just skew that downwards. And so I don't know that it's so much of I think more sophisticated video production helps, and looking at things like the thumbnail and title aligning with the actual content, paying that off in the first like 30 seconds or so and affirming that people are going to get what they came for. Stuff like that, it definitely helps. Your pacing being good. I don't think the like lower thirds and the way that you're like going beyond just the two screens, like that's what Justin and I do for our show, and we get good
graphic display.
Yeah. I think all that's like very at the far end of optimizing that. I think if you're really going, like if you want to get millions of views on YouTube, I think that matters more. I think if you are a brand who's trying to speak to a concentrated target audience that might not be that big, I don't actually think you need that. I think there's a minimum level of like professionalism that people are going to feel like this is going to be worth their time, but I don't think it needs to be crazy YouTuber level production.
And there's this weird thing happening where people who consume podcasts on YouTube are not actually watching as they consume. They're just listening like an audio. I think that's awesome. I did want to ask you about the average cost per consumable hour, which I love that you and Harry are diving into this. Harry and I had a discussion about average cost per consumable minute, and I'm just, as a data freak, I love this concept. For brands, explain what this means, and did you get all this social media stuff out of any podcast episode that you do? And did you include that? Because if people are scrolling and the average view on a social media post is 3 seconds, good luck. Did you add all that in as well? Or are those just the freebies on the fringes?
Yeah, so this is specifically audio and YouTube shows, and so I can only imagine the data crunching that would then be across all platforms, average, and then there's some assumptions that go into that as well with how long are people actually watching. But so these numbers here of the average cost per minute or hour of attention, in our case it's hour. Basically, we took the amount of consumption time on each platform. And so looking across, if we actually scroll up here a little bit in the report, we've got some of the data that went into this. So we looked at some of the things like average episode duration, which is different between audio and video, average completion rate, different between audio and audio video shows, and then average number of episodes a month. And so we based this on the monthly budget that they were spending. And so this was also a little bit different, that audio only shows tended to produce a little bit more frequently than audio video shows. And then we looked at all this consumption time. So there was the cost, there was these various kind of parameters, and then looking at, how much consumption time was there per month. And so for audio video shows, that was 1,275 hours per month. And then on audio, that was just under 700. So a decent amount less. And then one of the interesting things about the report is you look at almost all the metrics here, and it's like, ooh, video looks pretty good right now. Like it's like they have bigger social media followings, bigger email lists. There's all these things, but you get down to the actual return on investment in terms of attention, and it turns out that audio is basically costs half as much per hour of attention. So a little bit of an interesting kind of curveball that gets thrown in there. It's like, I can imagine somebody reading the report who's thinking about going all in on video. They almost convince themselves, and then they get to the end and they're like, oh, am I better off just trying to invest in getting more people into the audio show in some other way than getting into video? So,
okay, for my little brain, why is that? Why that's not half, but that's, what is that, 2/3 of the cost or so? Is that just because it's so much less expensive to produce the audio?
Well, it's two things really. It is, so when we looked at you mentioned before that the time that people are spending on production is very similar. Actually, this has kind of boggled my mind that audio video producers actually spent less time on production of their show. They spent more time on marketing. So in total, they spent a little bit more time, but they actually spent less time on production per episode.
Because they're sophisticated. They have sophisticated processes here.
Probably, and also they have teams was the main thing, that they were way more likely to have full-time employees, part-time employees. They were actually less likely to have contractors, but the people who produced audio-only shows, it was very low percentage of them had any other support, really. It was most common for them to have one or two contractors. And then also audio-video producers were much more likely to work with agencies as well. And these are still not like a ton. It's not like the average audio video show has multiple full-time employees and part-time employees. It's like they might have one full-time employee who works on the show to some extent. Maybe they also have some contractors, and maybe they work with an agency in some kind of capacity as well. And so that's, I think, where a lot of that cost came in, is that they are spending a lot more on production in general. And then the other thing is that additional, let's just call it additional, like, load of the team that they are, and whatever the other expenses are, that could be equipment, it could be podcast studios, things like that. What they're getting for it is, certainly they're getting more plays from YouTube, but those plays, like, they're getting not quite double. They're not doubling the number of plays overall, but when we look at the actual consumption time, because the average view duration is so low, that doesn't really pay off in terms of YouTube. It's like, so they get some more plays, they spend quite a bit more money on this, but they're not getting the full kind of bang for their buck that they would from just the amount it costs to get audio consumption, because of that long average listen time that podcasting generally has.
And it's the time consumed that takes you further down the funnel, beyond attention and into interest and desire. Mm-hmm. You're closer to whatever the action is that you're trying to achieve through your podcast. So audio still has power here. Jeremy, I really appreciate your time. We have a link in the show notes to the study and to the Podcast Academy. Get in touch with Jeremy, but study the report. Have a look at the numbers. We're in a data-filled world. Thanks for your time, Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.